All right, y'all. We're gonna go live. Everyone cool? You're gonna start. Yep. Getting notes from Elena. Tarek. Yes. Okay. Let's go.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here with you. My name is Tarek Ismail. I teach at CUNY Law School in New York City, and I'm on the steering committee of the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Elena Stein. I'm with Jewish Voice for Peace, and it's an honor to be with all of you today.
Today, after 112 days of genocide, Palestinians will have their day in court in their lawsuit against President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Austin. In their own words, Palestinian plaintiffs will tell the truth of the Biden administration's failure to prevent genocide, the crime of crimes, and the US government's complicity in Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people. This is a pre-hearing live stream where we'll hear from lawyers, advocates, and organizers about the importance of this momentous case. They're going to break down what this case is and why it's so significant. They're going to help us understand how to make this case useful for the movement, regardless of the outcome. We'll also hear about the very significant ruling that came down just this morning in South Africa's case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. There, the court ruled that there is indeed a plausible charge of genocide. They dismissed Israel's attempt to throw the case out, and they ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent genocide in Gaza. While we know it fell short of calling for a full ceasefire, the court would not have ruled this way without a global movement that pushed them to recognize the genocide alleged. Part of what's significant today is that while South Africa brings Israel to the World Court, we're also bringing the United States to court at the same time. Because this is not Israel's war against the Palestinian people alone, it is also the US's, and the US must be held to account. We're appreciative of South Africa and its people for standing up to demand justice on the world stage, and we're also proud today of all of the tireless work of the Center for Constitutional Rights in bringing this case, Defense for Children International Palestine v. Biden, against the United States.
So here's what's going to happen. We are going to be hosting this pre-hearing live stream for the next hour and a half. And then at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. East, which is 7 p.m. in Palestine, we're then all going to move to a different link to begin watching the hearing live from Oakland, California, where Palestinian families and community members will be present in person watching, with many more rallying outside. But before we go live to the hearing over the next hour and a half, we're going to hear from historical movement legal experts talking about the significance of this case, helping us understand it, and breaking down how to understand what's going to happen in that hearing so that everyone here can understand it. Meanwhile, today is an international day of action for a permanent ceasefire. So all around the country, communities are organizing today to amplify this case and to hold the Biden administration accountable for its complicity in the genocide of Palestinians. And so if you are watching right now, we invite you to take action where you are. Throughout this live stream, please check out the links in the YouTube bio to an action toolkit where you can get guidance on how to take action today.
We're going to open this morning with an audio clip from Adalah al-Haddad. Adalah is a resident of Gaza City and is currently displaced to Rafah. He's a cousin of a plaintiff in the case that'll have its hearing today, Layla al-Haddad.
Dad, an academic lecturer from Gaza City. I'm married and the father of 2 children. We used to live a peaceful life in our beautiful home with lots of love and hope. We worked hard to provide a better future for our children. Suddenly, we found ourselves living amidst constant explosions and bombing with a lot of fear. I had to flee with my family and kids several times after the Israeli army destroyed our home, until we arrived to Rafah City. Nothing can describe the fear that we live in with our kids for more than 100 days now, which always outweighed other sufferings we experience, such as hunger, disease, lack of health care, and lack of suitable shelter in this cold weather. In the north of Gaza, our relatives eat animal feed and drink polluted water in the midst of a real famine, while in the south of the Gaza Strip, children are dying from the cold in this weather inside tents. The United States government stands extremely biased toward the Israeli side and provides them with unlimited support, while ignoring the suffering of the 2 million Palestinians. Most of them are women and children. Therefore, we, as a Palestinian from Gaza City and Gaza Strip, hold the United States government the responsibility for the destruction of our lives. We hope to preserve what remains of our dreams for a peaceful life. That's why this war must stop, not just for us, but for the future generations.
And we so appreciate that message from Abdallah, and we're delighted to be able to introduce a panel first to discuss the historical context for this case. We have with us Ata Hindi, professor at Tulane Law School and counsel with the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, Lara Alborno, Palestinian American international lawyer, activist, and co-host of the Palestine Pod, and Jihad Abu Salim from Deir al-Balah in the Gaza Strip, writer and co-editor of Light in Gaza, Writings Born on Fire.
We're honored to be with all of you today. Lara, we'd love to begin with you. Can you situate the significance of today's hearing in the experiences of Palestinians in Gaza over recent generations, and what it means to now have Palestinians in court against the prime supporters of Israel?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for having me. Look, today is a historic day for a number of reasons. We obviously just are coming from sort of digesting what we saw in the ICJ hearing, and now we're about to go into the hearing, which is taking place in the United States, charging the Biden administration with complicity in Israel's ongoing genocide. And, you know, I'm looking at this as a Palestinian, as a lawyer, as a Palestinian with roots in Gaza. And, you know, I have so many different hats that I wear, different perspectives, but I just want to bring us back to the beginning a little bit, if I can situate us historically. I'm not here to speak about the law, let the other panelists do that. One of the things that I thought was most powerful about South Africa's oral argument was that they began with an acknowledgement of the Nakba. A few seconds into their oral argument, that was the single point that came out of their intervention. We are here to recognize the Nakba and recognize what happened to Palestinians. And so I would just like us to think about that point for a moment here and understand that everything that is happening to Palestinians in Gaza today is not happening to a people who, prior to October 7th, were living with full freedom and rights on their land and had, you know, not a concern in this world. Our story is one that unfortunately leaves us in a position where for more than 75 years, we've never had our human rights respected for a single day. And to know that the majority of Palestinians in Gaza are Nakba survivors or the descendants of Nakba survivors is something that I think is essential to our understanding of the significance of these efforts to hold Israel and the United States accountable. Not only are Palestinians in Gaza, the majority of them from Gaza, but the oppression didn't end with the Nakba. It was followed by, we know, 56 years of military occupation, 17 years of a brutal siege that caged Palestinians in Gaza, and now we see over 110 days of this unfolding genocide. So we're talking about generations of Palestinians who have lived deep, deep trauma that has never been allowed to heal. We have never been allowed to get to the point where the trauma has ceased and we can actually begin to heal and begin to grieve and begin to move forward with our lives. Instead, the trauma continues to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. And therefore, we must all mobilize. And efforts like the lawsuit brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights, efforts like the lawsuit brought by South Africa, are some of the numerous efforts that are taking place in this moment to try to finally bring an end to this 75 years of impunity and lack of accountability that has allowed us to get to this point. And so this is a historic moment And I'm hopeful that with the pressure that is now going to be applied by the ICJ's finding that the, the lawsuit in the United States against the Biden administration can also proceed in such a manner that eventually there will be a ruling on the merits and holding the Biden administration accountable, finding that there is indeed complicity or at least failure to prevent genocide. But I hope that those initial comments of just remembering what people in Gaza have been through for over 75 years and how deeply, deeply justice is needed in this moment more than ever will at least situate us in understanding the importance of these various events.
Thank you, Lara. I want to move to Ata. Ata, your work has taken you to Gaza, and you also supported an amicus brief in the case for Palestinian American families trapped in Gaza. Can you share some of the reality they're facing and the neglect they're experiencing at the hands of the U.S. government?
Yeah, thank you all for having me. And when I was last working in Palestine, I had the opportunity to go to Gaza on several occasions, and it almost seemed like every single time I go to Gaza, the situation just got worse and worse. One of my first visits and the last period I was there was after the 2014 destruction, where you could still see the rubble pretty much everywhere. You still see rubble from previous series of destructions that occurred within the Gaza Strip. Just complete devastation in some areas, and it's a constant pattern of destroying and rebuilding. And it's hard to see. Well, it was hard then to see any possibility of the Palestinian people in Gaza in their ability to fully, or at least even, to be honest, remotely enjoy their right to self-determination. I recall on my last visit even meeting with probably one of the most devastating trips that I had. There was meeting with victims of the shootings, of the Israeli shootings on the Great March of Return, all individuals that were shot in their backs and were completely paralyzed. And one of them died shortly after my visit, unfortunately. And you realize that, again, it's just this, this recurring process. And I thought it couldn't get worse. And obviously what we've seen over the past couple months is a clear indication that not only has it gotten worse, that respect for international law, generally speaking, has just completely lessened, and that there are exceptions to the rules, or the rules-based international order as we'd like to see it. And none of this could be done without the United States government. It can't continue funding this war without the United States government. And a lot of people, are worried about enforcing this decision today, which basically found a plausible case for genocide, and saying, what about enforcing it? And talking about going to the Security Council. To be honest, you don't even need to go to the Security Council, because it's in the United States to say whether or not, through its weapons in particular, whether or not this genocide continues. I was happy to support this amicus brief for the American and Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, who's been, we, like other organizations, have been drowning in complaints of discrimination against Palestinian, Arab, Muslim Americans within the United Nations. We're trying to keep up. We're getting there. And we're, building our resources further, the organization itself is doing an amazing job, like all the other organizations, Palestine Legal and others. And I was happy to support the work of the ADC and putting together this amicus brief and talking to Palestinian Americans from Gaza, with families in Gaza throughout the United States. We're just, reiterating these narratives, these ongoing narratives of death and destruction. Individuals who have lost families altogether, who are not in communication with their families, and who are not able to, who go in these little spaces of time where the next message we get is 50-50. Maybe they're alive, maybe they're not. And
Thank you, Atta.
yeah, and sorry, I'll just end with saying, and it's unfortunate to see how little the U.S. government in particular has paid attention to these American citizens and their families. And we hope that the court will do something to change that.
That's exactly right, and exactly why we're so proud that this case is being brought today. Thank you so much for all of that. And now we're honored to hear from Jihad Abu Salim. Jihad, can you tell us how, or share with us how significant it is that to you and your families and loved ones, that today a group of Palestinians will provide testimony in front of a U.S. court? As our understanding that this is the first time this is happening in an offensive posture, broadcast live around the world in an effort to hold the U.S. legally accountable for its role in Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza.
Thank you so much for this question and for having me today. Of course, today marks a significant moment, not just for me and my family, but for countless Palestinian families, especially those from and in Gaza, who have long been silenced by Israel and its allies. And of course, this silence is not just a matter of being unheard. It represents decades of suppressed truths, unacknowledged suffering, and the denial of fundamental human rights, and assaults on the lives and dignity of millions of Palestinians, including those who live in the Gaza Strip. What we are witnessing today in Gaza is not an isolated incident. It is the culmination of decades of systemic violence and oppression that began before, during, and after the 1948 Nakba. The Nakba set in motion a series of aggressions and assaults that have continually eroded and targeted the lives, freedom, and dignity of the Palestinian people. And Gaza in particular has borne the brunt of this oppression through numerous massacres, blockades, and targeted schemes designed to undermine the very existence of Palestinians there, expel them, and assault their freedom and dignity, as I said. So whether it's the ICJ ruling today or the testimony in front of the US court, which would be broadcasted live, these are pivotal moments in our long struggle for justice. They represent an opportunity to bring light to the harsh realities that Palestinians have been enduring for generations, and the fact that this event aims to hold the United States accountable for its role in supporting Israel's assault on the Palestinian people, especially what we're witnessing in Gaza, is definitely a crucial step towards justice. And I personally hope that it is a wake-up call to the international community that the status quo in Gaza is not only unsustainable, but has been so for decades, and a fundamental change in approach and understanding and framing are definitely needed. Our families in Gaza live under the constant threat of death, injury, and the destruction of homes and property. The psychological and physical toll of this perpetual state of uncertainty and danger is immeasurable. Therefore, any effort that seeks to bring attention to our plight, to push for accountability, and to end this cycle of violence is not just welcome but necessary. I hope, and on behalf of my family and everybody I love and I care about, that today's hearing will ignite a broader conversation about Palestinian rights and the Palestinian struggle for justice and liberation, and the urgent need for ending the killing in Gaza. This is about recognizing and affirming the humanity of every Palestinian who has suffered under these terrible conditions that we've been seeing. And let us remember today that behind the statistics and the headlines, there are real people with real stories of loss, of resilience, and an unyielding hope and struggle for a better future. So once again, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully this is just another step in a long journey towards justice and liberation. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jihad. Yes, an unyielding struggle, and all the love to you and to your family and to all of the people of Gaza. We are now going to go into the legal case. What is the legal case that is being brought today to the Biden administration? We're going to break down what are the basics of this case and why is it so significant. To start us off, we're going to hear from Noura Erakat, human rights attorney and associate professor of Africana Studies at Rutgers University. So Noura, can you help us understand what are the basics of this case and why is it so significant?
So this case is pretty historic because it is charging the Biden administration, and in particular President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Austin, with a failure to uphold their obligations under the Genocide Convention. The Genocide Convention, legislated in 1948 in the aftermath of genocide within Europe's shores, is not ratified by the United States until 1988, specifically because its terms raise the specter of culpability of U.S. genocide, not only of Native Americans, for which they've never taken responsibility, but also against African Americans, as enshrined in the 1951 petition to the United Nations, We Charge Genocide, that was filed by the Civil Rights Congress at the time. The U.S., which oversaw a structure of racism for which, the end of which, as articulated by Martin Luther King Jr., if you do not think that I have the right to sit at any counter that I want, to be served, to move around freely, then what right do I have to life, right? That there's a continuum between the structure of racism and the structure of annihilation that, manifests in the genocide charge. All that to be said, this would be the first time that the U.S. is going to face this charge that it is failing to prevent genocide, not only complicity in genocide, and more historically so because it's brought by Palestinians. And we should remember that this particular Israeli genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza is not only an Israeli war, but is a U.S. war, as indicated by the provision of intelligence, support, diplomatic cover, as we've seen in the 2 Security Council vetoes that have impeded ceasefire. And so this is quite significant. It's not charging the administration, however, with genocide. It's just saying that as a party to this convention, the duty is to prevent it when we know that it's seen. And there have been enough warnings now by 800 genocide and law scholars, 22 UN special rapporteurs, 15 UN working groups, the former director of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as enumerated and laid out by the South African application to the International Court of Justice. We do not have to wait for genocide to be complete to know that there is enough to tell us that we should do what's necessary in order to prevent it. And so this is what we're seeing take place at the court in the case brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights.
Noura, we're going to hear the government attorneys argue about the political question doctrine over and over. It appears all over their briefs. Can you tell us a little bit about what the political question doctrine is and how it's used by the government in cases like this one and others?
Absolutely. So the political question doctrine is what emerges in a Supreme Court case in Baker versus Carr, where the judiciary had to evaluate, something that the executive branch was doing. And here, in order, in deference to the separation of powers within the United States, and really because the judiciary doesn't want to get involved in cases that it believes is better suited for other branches of government, be it the executive branch, which has, the power over foreign policy, or the legislative branch, which has the power to create law. The judiciary says, look, there might be something that we can say in this case, but we think that it's better reserved for another branch of government rather than for us to wade into it, right? And so the political question doctrine has been used by the court, by federal courts, in multiple instances, including in instances in cases that I brought together with the Center for Constitutional Rights against alleged Israeli war criminals Avi Dichter and Moshe Alon in 2006 for their role in the demolition of 5,000 homes in the south of Gaza and Rafah in 2005, as well as for the bombing of a United Nations compound in the south of Lebanon in Qana. And so in 1996, and so we see the political question doctrine raised in that case, where the Supreme Court never even gets to the merits of the case and says, we're not the suitable branch of government to decide on the legality here. A couple of things about this point. Number one, there is precedent in the United States to adjudicate a case of genocide, which we know is justiciable because of the way that the law is broken down. And so we have precedent if the court wants to go there. Number two, in my own query about how the political question doctrine is used in the United States, I found and published, I think it was a 2008 case, that in fact, political question doctrine did not impede similarly politically contentious cases that implicated China or the Philippines or Papua New Guinea, or Paraguay, or other cases where we had similarly political contentious issues. But I did find, right, systematic bias of the use of political question when the petitioner was Arab, Lebanese, as well as Palestinians, and the accused was Israeli. And so we should be mindful that this is not merely going to be a case that looks at precedent and analogy, and just on a legal basis, but that politics will also shape these cases. The judges themselves are concerned with their future, right? Which party are they appealing to? Will they be tapped to join the Supreme Court? Yes or no? What are their concerns? That this is not just going to be looking at the law and telling us what it is. And so we should be prepared for that particular outcome, but also not deterred by that outcome, because there is precedent for it. And yet people power has continued to reshape the law and tell us what is and is not morally just.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Noura for sharing thoughts on the legal and political context and how they combine here. For more discussion on the question of the legal context, we're going to turn to two experts, Daryl Lee and Rabia Ikhbaria. Daryl Lee is an anthropologist and lawyer teaching at the University of Chicago, and Rabia Ikhbaria is a JD candidate at Harvard University. Welcome both. Rabia, I'm going to turn to you first for your immediate reactions to the ICJ ruling that just came down a few hours ago. Can you tell us what they ruled and how that decision is going to impact the case that we will be witnessing today?
Thank you, Tariq. So we're just all processing, as Lara said, the ICJ decision. I think there is a lot of conflicting views on this matter and how to interpret the ICJ decision, because essentially the ICJ acknowledged that there is a plausible case for genocide in Gaza, but it fell short from calling for a ceasefire. And this is already problematic, and there will be, though, a fight over what the provisional measures it ordered actually mean. Because the ICJ did order some provisional measures, not all. It ordered that Israel had the obligation to stop all actions that fall under the Genocide Convention. Now, the problem with this type of language is that it relegates to Israel or delegates to Israel the interpretation of how to implement this actual decision. And this is to be expected, to be honest, from an international body like the ICJ. I want to remind us all that, you know, the movement that called for a ceasefire does not derive its authority or moral authority from the International Court of Justice. It's a claim that is formulated, and the law is a power. It's medium to articulate certain claims, but it's ultimately enveloped in narratives that assign it meaning. And the movement, the global movement that for months now has pushed world governments and protested and, you know, occupied the streets demanding a ceasefire is what made this court order plausible to begin with. So I just want to reiterate, you know, in terms of what the meaning of the ICJ hearing, it's yet to be seen on the broader level. It is for many Palestinians a disappointment so far. I've been, you know, trying to follow with what the Palestinian reactions also to this court hearing. You know, the material manifestations of this decision will not be seen tomorrow in Gaza, but still, it is important to note that the ICJ simply affirmed today what we all know, that there is that the case for genocide in Gaza is more than just plausible, that the case for genocide is in fact, you know, it basically the ICJ put the word governments again. You know, it's not the first time. We should not be deriving all authority from this institution, but the ICJ put the word governments on notice yet again. Now, in terms of, you know, the limits of this court decision, I think it's reflective of the international legal system itself and the distribution of power it carries. Now, I just want to note that for us as Palestinians, and I want to echo Jihad's words, the genocide in Gaza is rooted in the process of the ongoing Nakba. And we should all be, you know, remembering this as we go to courts and as we continue our struggle and as we call for a ceasefire now.
Thank you so much, Rabia, for all of that. So appreciate these early interpretations of this, the ICJ ruling that just came down this morning. And the reminder that it's a result of the people around the world, Palestinian people resisting and people around the world resisting in meaningful solidarity. And Daryl, we'd love to go down to you. In just about an hour, we're all going to be watching the hearing live. And for those of us who are not legal experts and who are not used to watching such a hearing, we'd love for you to help us understand what we will be watching and help us interpret it. What can we expect? What is the hearing about? And how is it likely to go? What are things we should be listening for, and how can we understand them ahead of time?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm really honored to be in conversation and in community with all of you today. You know, it's interesting. It's not entirely, I don't know exactly what to say about what to expect today, because the nature of this hearing is actually quite unusual, maybe even unprecedented in some ways. So what the judge said in his order was that there would be two parts. The first part, he allotted 45 minutes for a set of arguments around some doctrinal legal matters. He spelled out some questions that he wants some lawyers to speak to. And that is where you're likely to hear a lot of the stuff that Noura really eloquently unpacked, right? Stuff about the political question doctrine, what is the nature of customary international law, so on and so forth. And again, just to reinforce what Noura said, the persistent message really from the government side is a demand not to actually get into the issues at stake in this case, right? A demand to not have a conversation, to not have a reckoning with the reality of genocide being perpetrated on the ground in Gaza, in Palestine. So essentially, the political question doctrine is a very elaborate form of, in my opinion, sort of legal hand-waving, right? That is a refusal of conversation, a refusal of inquiry, a refusal of thinking, and a refusal of reckoning. The second part of the format for today is the part that's actually unusual. The judge has allotted 2 hours for witnesses from the plaintiff's side to provide live testimony in the courtroom, or rather, live streamed testimony. And the reason why that's unusual is because in cases like this, what we have here is, this is not a hearing on the final merits of the case. It's a hearing on a preliminary injunction, right? So it's an ask from the plaintiffs that says, hey, look, we know you can't resolve this case very quickly, but in the meantime, there is so much at stake. There is so much risk of irreparable harm. And we have a substantial likelihood of success at the end of the case that you should issue a kind of emergency order in the here and now to at least preserve the status quo as much as possible. Now, normally when you have a hearing to argue on these types of issues, it's your kind of standard technical, it's the first part of the hearing, right? It's lawyers getting up, talking about technical legal issues. You rarely get into the facts and the human reality because the attitude of the courts is, we're just going to save that for later. So for the judge to open the door to that now, to allow people on the record in a federal courtroom to articulate their lived reality, their harms, their fears, their experiences in a way that the government is forced to respond to at this early stage of litigation, that is what is unusual and potentially historic about the events of today. And I think, as to echo what Rabia said, all of this is made possible by people power, by the demands of those in the streets from Gaza to capitals and cities and small towns all around the world. And that energy that popular mobilization and popular resistance creates shapes the conditions of possibility for struggle on the legal terrain as well.
Thank you so much, Daryl. So appreciate all of that. Thank you for making this legible to a non-legal crowd who want to follow the hearing today and understand it, and for lifting up the historic nature of this case, that Palestinians will be giving live testimony and bringing an offensive case against the U.S. government.
And to
thank
the,
you.
Go ahead, Elena.
Thank you, Sadiq.
Just reiterating thanks to both Rabia and Daryl, to the 1,000+ watching on YouTube. Just want to remind folks that this is a pre-hearing briefing where we're discussing the case DCI Palestine versus Biden, a case suing the Biden administration for their failure to prevent and complicity in genocide in Gaza. A point that I think Rabia wanted to raise, but for time, was that the ICJ ruling, in fact, underlines the Biden administration's complicity in that genocide and their duty to prevent that genocide. And so I'm sure that's a tool that the lawyers will be bringing in to the argument today as they make their arguments in those 45 minutes that Daryl told us about. Okay, to you, Elena.
In a moment, we're going to get into some of the political context behind today's case as we lead up to the hearing in an hour. But now we're going to be blessed by the poetry of Muhammad al-Kurd and the music of Clarissa Bitar. This is Why We Dance.
This is why we dance. My father told me anger is a luxury that we cannot afford. Be composed, calm, still. Laugh when they ask you, smile when they talk, answer them, educate them. This is why we dance, because if I speak, I'm dangerous. You open your mouth, you raise your eyebrows, you point your fingers. This is why we dance. Wounded feet, but the rhythm remains. This is why we dance, because no matter how many adjectives you stack upon my shoulders, I define me. Now this is why we dance, because even my poetry isn't free. Now can you please just tell me, why is anger, even anger, a luxury to me?
Why is anger even a luxury to me? From Hamad al-Kurd, with music by Clarissa Bitar. We are going to move on to a discussion of the political context next. We'll first be speaking with Josh Paul, a former director at the U.S. State Department. Thank you, Josh, for joining us. My first question to you, we hear almost inconceivable amounts of money being discussed when it comes to U.S. military support to Israel. The numbers are hard to even fathom. $3.8 billion every year, $14 billion in new funding since October 7th. We don't want to dwell too much on the numbers, except to take note of their gargantuan nature. Can you give us a sense for the approximate estimate? Can you contextualize what that means in terms of the types of military equipment that the U.S. is likely to have already provided to Israel, either directly or indirectly, since the 7th of October?
Yes, thank you, and good morning on an important day for justice. I think understanding the US arms transfer relationship with Israel is important, as it underpins both Israel's broader approach to the Palestinians, as well as what it has been doing, particularly in Gaza, for almost the past 4 months. US funding subsidizes not only Israel's defense procurement from the US, but subsidizes Israel's defense industry as well. As my declaration in support of the case today describes, in the past decade alone, US arms transfers to Israel have included scores of individual cases, but everything from fighter jets to firearms, generators, precision-guided munitions, dumb bombs, helicopters, missiles, ammunition, armored vehicles, mobile guard towers, fuel, and I could go on for a long time. Since October 7th, we've seen a sharp increase in the transfer of arms to Israel, both through the speeding up of previously authorized transfers of precision-guided munitions, and through the ramming through Congress of so-called emergency sales of thousands of rounds of tank ammunition and artillery shells. We also know that Israel has been drawing heavily on the pre-positioned stockpile the US maintains in Israel, though the numbers there are much less transparent and harder to come by. The bottom line is that the US has likely transferred munitions totaling in the tens of thousands since October 7th to Israel, ranging from air-to-ground bombs and munitions to spare parts. In doing so, I believe we have likely set aside many of the relevant statutes and policies that typically govern arms transfers, particularly in terms of requirements that are intended to prevent US arms from being used to cause human rights violations. This also demonstrates, I think, the significant amount of leverage that we have if we wanted to push Israel to end or curtail its operations in Gaza. Thank you.
Josh Paul, you're a former director at the US State Department, and I think people who are taking relentless action right now really want to understand what's going on behind the facade at the State Department. So we're wondering things like, to what extent is the widespread vocal concern expressed by the majority of Americans right now, and of course across the world, a concern also shared by rank and file State Department officials? You know, are there genuine concerns among people within not just the lower levels, but also the upper levels of the State Department? And what kinds of efforts, as someone who's been in the State Department as a former director, what kind of efforts by concerned citizens do you think catch the attention of State Department decision makers? And especially today, do you imagine they are watching? Are they having their eye on legal accountability efforts like today's case against Biden, Blinken, and Austin?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with that last part, which is yes, these sorts of cases do matter. Both the case that the CCR is pursuing in the US District Court in California, and the ICJ case. During the Saudi-led coalition bombing of Yemen, in which concerns were raised that cases could be brought to the International Criminal Court, there were actually US officials who declined to sign on arms transfers, recognizing that they could be complicit in war crimes. And I understand that the same is happening right now. There are many officials who would normally be a part of policy decisions who have recused themselves from those policy decisions. I think that's important. And I think that debate does go up to the senior levels. Even as I say that, I understand that the US is in the process of considering further major arms sales of precision-guided munitions to Israel. But that there are people raising concerns about those cases, asking questions, both of Israel and of the Defense Department, that may, drive further discussions. At the end of the day, I'm not sure that those discussions will lead to any changes, which is particularly disappointing on the legal side. Again, where I believe there are binding laws that are not being properly applied and they're not being followed. But I think it is significant, and I think there is a wide amount of disagreement with the track the administration is on, both on a moral basis, a legal basis, and a policy basis.
Appreciate all of that. And I just want to follow up on one piece you said, which is that in this case, that it's impossible for Israel to have conducted its military operations without a vast amount of US weaponry. I just want to underscore that and ask you, is that right?
Yes, I mean, that's obviously the case in terms of Israel's total weapons load. When you look at, the majority of their stockpile, particularly of precision-guided weapons, of, air-to-ground munitions, of artillery shells coming from the US. It's also the case, very briefly, when you look at the emergency sales the Biden administration conducted in the last couple of months. I don't believe that's because Israel was running out of artillery shells. Rather, it was running out of, or it's running towards, the strategic reserve that it holds for contingencies such as the Hezbollah conflict. So what the US essentially is doing by rushing these arms is saying to Israel, you don't have to make hard choices. You don't have to decide where your actual threat is. You can keep going at the pace you are going in Gaza and have enough stocks to deal with any other contingency.
Thank you, Josh Paul. Really important framing that here the American government is preventing the Israeli government from making hard choices. They are making every choice easy. They are making every genocidal choice a quick and easy one to make. Thank you for underlining that and for your submission to the court in a declaration on those same terms. We're going to turn now to Beth Miller, the political director at Jewish Voice for Peace Action. Hi, Beth. Over the last 3 months, we've seen unprecedented levels of mass protest aimed at pushing Congress to shift positions and demand an end to Israel's bombardment of Palestinians. Given all of the work that you do on Capitol Hill, we'd love your insight. Do these protests have an impact? And what are the ways that you've seen Congress move or refuse to move around speaking out on a ceasefire right now?
Thanks so much, Tarek, and it's such an honor to be part of the group of people who are speaking today. The short answer is yes. Protests, mass mobilizations, any way that we can be making our voices and our demands heard does have an impact on Congress. It's also true that it can be very hard to see that impact, and that impact has not yet become material. It has not yet become a big enough impact that Congress has, for example, demanded an end to the weapons that we are sending to the Israeli government. And I think that for those of us who are organizers, who are activists, who are part of the movement for Palestinian liberation being led by Palestinians, it's important for us to be able to hold both of those things at the same time. That on the one hand, every single thing that we are doing matters, and it is widening the cracks in what used to be unwavering, unquestioning support for the Israeli government, and that our tactics work. And at the same time, it's also true that the US's complicity is continuing and moving forward, and that the changes are not happening nearly fast enough to meet the overwhelming, nightmarish urgency of the moment. And it can be hard to hold both of those things at the same time. But when this started, when this genocide started, we were at only a small handful of members of Congress who were willing to even entertain the possibility of demanding a ceasefire. That speaks to how far gone the US government is when it comes to its complicity. Now we are at over 65 members of Congress who are demanding a ceasefire. And we also have members of Congress who are pushing for restrictions, conditions, and cutting of the weapons that we are sending to the Israeli government. And so, again, when I say that, on the one hand, it's pathetic, right? 65 members of Congress calling for a ceasefire, that's nothing. And on the other hand, it's also true that every single one of those members who has moved because of grassroots pressure from their constituents demanding it, and showing up at their offices every single day, flooding their phone lines, making it impossible for them to make any other decision. And I think that the biggest thing, the thing I'll end on, is that it's good for us to remember that for the overwhelming majority of members of Congress, this is not true for all of them, but for most of them, they are making decisions based on a political calculus. They are not making decisions based on what they believe to be right or wrong. That is a problem, and it's also true. But what that means then is that we have power over their political calculus. And if we can shift it by making it clear that they will not get a moment's peace or rest until they change their positions, we can be louder and stronger and push toward that. And so there is an impact, and the cracks are really starting to show.
Thank you so much for that context, Beth. I think it's really helpful for people who are, following the actions like the ones that are at the bottom of this YouTube video, calling Congress, sending letters, to know exactly how those actions are manifesting. And it's incredibly frustrating to folks to know that it's only 66 members of Congress as compared to the vast majority of the Democratic Party, for example, who believe Israel is committing a genocide, which we learned just yesterday. We're going to move to our next question for you, Beth. Can you tell us how this moment right now, in your view, fits into the longer term struggle that the Palestinian rights movement in the US has been pushing for decades, which is to end US government complicity in Israeli apartheid?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we're in a position where there is a top line demand, which is also one of the most basic baseline humanitarian demands that we could be making. These protests taking over the Cannon House Rotunda, shutting down bridges, shutting down weapons manufacturers, all of these protests are calling for a ceasefire. That is the most basic humanitarian thing that we could be demanding right now. And it's important that we be clear that that is not the be all end all of what the movement's calling for, right? The Palestinian liberation movement in the US is calling for an overall end to US complicity in Israel's ongoing apartheid, Israel's ethnic cleansing, Israel's occupation, etc. And that includes an end to all US military funding to Israel. And the ways, though, that this fits in right now is that what we're seeing right now is an exposure of the extent to which the United States is complicit. And like Nora said before, that this is also the United States war. And that is shifting the opinions of constituents and of voters who did not realize that before. They did not understand the full extent to which the Biden administration, Congress, and other US agencies are fully backing Israel's oppression of Palestinians. And so we're seeing the ways that this is shifting how voters and constituents think about sending weapons to the Israeli government, who they are sympathizing with as they look around and see what's happening and what kind of changes they want to see. And it's now on the movement to take the fact that all of these new people are coming in as part of the struggle for an immediate ceasefire. And it's now on us to take them, educate them about the broader situation, and keep them with us as we now push for what comes next, which is an end to military funding to the Israeli government, a shift in the US government's positions overall, and these larger demands. But we're coming back with more people, with more power, with more mass mobilization behind us. And that is how these things that are just small cracks right now become a shattering of US complicity overall in the future.
Thank you so much, Beth, for everything you do and for sharing. It's been a pleasure to hear from you. Again, just to remind folks, we are here in a pre-hearing briefing for the case that will be heard in the Northern District of California at 12 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, and 7 p.m. in Palestine. We'll share the link for y'all to jump over to that hearing at the end of this briefing. A reminder that case, DCI Palestine v. Biden, is a case suing the Biden administration, the Secretaries of Defense, State, and the President himself for complicity and failure to prevent genocide in Gaza. That case will build upon the decision we heard from the ICJ this morning. Reminder too that there are links at the bottom of this YouTube page that you can use to take action in this moment, and we encourage y'all to do that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Elena.
Great. So we're now very excited to go live to outside the courthouse in Oakland right now. We're going to hear from Kimmy with Bay Resistance and the Oakland organizing team. First of all, Kimmy, congratulations to Bay Resistance and to other Bay organizers for all of the amazing organizing that you've been doing. And of course, the recent victory to get the San Francisco City Supervisor's ceasefire resolution passed and then defended against mayoral veto.
Yes.
So take us to outside the courthouse right now. What's happening outside the court today? What is the energy? And for those who are not in the Bay and who are following, how can people follow the activities online today?
Yeah, so I am out here in Oakland right now. You can see behind me, this is the actual courthouse with the line that's happening. Folks have been lining up since 8 o'clock to try to get in. The seats, there's only about 80 seats inside, so we have an overflow space for folks, but folks are excited to be here. I'm gonna just zoom around. You can see there's folks gathering. Folks are offering free coffee and bagels to people. There are community groups out here later that will be taking some art actions out here. So we'll have support. So when the plaintiffs come out, we're ready to greet them. We're gonna have a rally with more people. But you can just see there's a lot of folks gathering right now, and they've been since the last couple of hours. Oh, and then if you want to follow us, sorry, you asked about how to connect. So you can look, Bay Resistance will be posting, as well as AROC. You can look at our Instagram, you can look at our Facebook, like all the different social media will be posting, letting people know what's going on. There's probably also going to be some different live streams you'll see from Oakland. A lot of supporters out here, and a lot of folks like to go online. So you'll see a lot of different places to get information.
Awesome. Thank you, Kimmy. Thank you to all the Bay organizers. It's really energizing to see you all out there. And it's a reminder of just how historic today is. That while the ICJ ruling is happening, we are also taking the US to court in Defense for International Palestine v. Biden, where the Center for Constitutional Rights is suing Biden, Blinken, and Austin for failure to prevent genocide and complicity in genocide. And it's a historic day for a number of reasons, including the fact that this is the first time we believe in US history when a Palestinian person will be taking the stand in a US courtroom, not in defense, but in an offensive posture, and we're going to be hearing live testimony from 7 Palestinians actively making the case for Palestinian rights. Thank you to all the organizers on the ground for bringing us with you. Back to you, Tariq.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Kimmy, for bringing us into that moment outside the courthouse. It looks like a lively place to be, and we're excited to hear how things go. We're going to hear again from Adalah al-Haddad, as we described before, Gaza resident who's been displaced, like so many millions of Palestinians in Gaza, to the south, to Rafah. He's a family member of a plaintiff in this case, Layla al-Haddad, and he has a message for us that about sort of what his perspective has been on this advocacy action and how it matters to folks in Gaza.
تكون جهودكم في موازين حسناتكم. أي وثقي تماما إنه أي عمل أنتم بتعملوه عندكم في الخارج، سواء مظاهرات أو منشورات أو حتى مقالات ولقاءات صحفية، فلها أثر كتير كبير عنا، فيعطيكم ألف عافية.
يعطيكم ألف عافية. May God grant you thousands upon thousands of blessings for your work that you're doing here in the movement. It's being heard and seen by folks on the ground in Gaza, despite everything that they're living through. We're going to move next to a discussion on what this case means for the movement for Palestinian liberation, both in the US and globally. I am honored to introduce our panelists. Paige Ingram is a cross-movement lead organizer with the Movement for Black Lives and Rising Majority. Lone Tran is the national director for Rising Majority. Sumaya Awad is the director of strategy and communications at Adalah Justice Project. And Dimitri Holzman is with Earthseed Youth International. Welcome to the four of y'all.
It's so sweet to be with all of you today. Grateful for you all and your movement work always, and now especially. So we have some questions for all of you to answer from your different perspectives, from your different corners. The first is, why is it so important for all of us across our movements to be throwing down right now with everything we have? We'd love to hear anything about what actions you and your organizations and others in your community are taking right now that you want folks to know about and to join in on. And for those who are wondering fairly if their actions are actually making any impact 112 days into this relentless genocide, we're watching live, and finding it hard to keep going, what would you say?
I'm going to kick us off. Oh, no, Sumaya, I feel like, okay, cool. I'll do it. And then I might come in later with something I forgot. But thank y'all so much for these questions. So again, I'm Paige. I'm with the Movement for Black Lives, and I'm also on the leadership team with Rising Majority. And, you know, I think that for what I tell people who ask me all the time about what do I do and how do I keep this sustainable is that every day I'm looking around and I continue to see these incredible and creative ways that people continue to push boundaries, hold leadership accountable, and I think also build community and solidarity around this fight that I think that people, I think a lot of people thought that these protests would be sustainable for a couple of weeks, a month, and folks are continuing to come together across class, across race, across sectors, people who have never engaged at all with movement, gone to a protest. Every day there are more and more people who continue to awaken around what's going on, and who, upon really learning and opening their eyes, feel a sense of commitment and feel a sense of energy that we are able to take whatever pieces of energy and inspiration that we need to move forward. We're really galvanizing around that. And so in my corner of the movement, what I'm seeing are people really working hard to make connections and draw connections. So the Movement for Black Lives has done a ton of work around political prisoners. And so you're seeing Black organizers and Black activists and advocates drawing those connections between Palestinian political prisoners and the work that's been going on in the US for some time. I think that what else feels really incredibly important to me, and I'm from Minneapolis, so I want to shout out my city, our city council just passed a ceasefire resolution. Here's what folks are doing. They're saying, let's take a different tactic. Let's go down to the local level. Let's push these people that we have worked hard to elect to take a stand and to try and create pressure from a different side of things. And so I think that in terms of movement, we have been doing a wonderful job at trying out different tactics and seeing what works, connecting together and trying to move this work forward and being relentless, and demonstrating to people that, in fact, we are in this. We are aware that this is a long haul. We are aware that we're demanding a ceasefire, and we're demanding much, much more. And so with that in mind, we are able to really think about how to be sustainable in this work, how to lean on each other, and how to support our communities in understanding why this is important to them. And with this, with this case, with the ICJ this morning, it's just becoming more apparent to everyday people that this is something that is worth engaging in and worth taking risk in. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Paige, for every word. Amen, amen. So Maya, with the Adalah Justice Project, we'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts on these questions?
Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Claudette. Just like agree with everything that Paige laid out. I think that we're in this moment where it's especially important for us not to lose momentum right now. It's especially important even after this ICJ ruling that we don't lose momentum, because these court cases are the beginning of something. They weren't a goal that we were working towards. They were actually a beginning of a new phase. And now we take these decisions and we use them. They complement the protests, right? Like these court cases, the one that's happening today in 20 minutes, this is complementing, and this is a result of sustained protest for nearly 4 months. And that's not stopping, that's not waning, that in fact it's growing louder and louder. The movement is bigger, and the catastrophe of this whole thing that we have to really contend with, that we really have to grapple with, is that the movement is growing, and it's because the destruction, the murder that Israel is committing is also expanding. It's reaching new levels. And that doesn't take away from the really historic thing that's happening today in California at the court, that Palestinians are testifying not in a defensive way, that they are openly their own narrative on their own grounds, and that they're doing so in these institutions of power that are rarely for the people, that are rarely there to serve the people. And we know that. And we're still doing it because we're showing Biden and Blinken and the US government that even in their institutions of power, we can hold them reliable, we can hold them accountable, and that we know that they're complicit, that we all of us already know that. Paige, Lone, and I, along with many other groups, are working on a people's tribunal to hold Israel accountable. And perhaps Lone will talk about this a little bit more, but it's also to reaffirm that we, the people, already know what's happening, and we've told you what's happening. And that's why these court cases are taking place. And that's why we're in the streets. After every single court, we're in the streets. We're in the streets rallying. We're in the streets protesting. We're disrupting events. We're making sure Biden can't speak anywhere without knowing that he may be disrupted. And that it's not just these figures that sort of represent the White House, but it's that every single person that is complicit in propping up and reproducing the US government and its aid to Israel is also complicit. And that we will hold them all accountable, if not today, then tomorrow, if not tomorrow, then next month. We won't forget. And Gaza has made it clear, people in Gaza have made it clear that they won't forget. And we're taking their lead. We're following their direction. And so this is not going to stop anytime soon. And I think it's especially important for people to understand that right now and understand that your role is so powerful, even if you don't see the fruit of the labor right now. And that actually rarely in history have these movements just, you know, in a day, two, or in a month or two, or in a year or two, seen the fruit of all of the organizing and building that they've put into things. It takes time, but every single action is important, no matter how small. Every conversation you have in your workplace or with your family, that is huge. That is historic. That is momentous. And we need more of them. We need more of them every day, every minute, because every minute in Gaza, someone is dying. Someone is being killed by Israel. They're being bombed. They're being starved. And that's why what we're doing is so important. And that's why we're not letting up and we're not stopping. And I encourage everybody to, you know, go to Adalah Justice Project's website to see everything that we're involved in. I don't want to just list things right now, but just remember that you are also most powerful in the industries, in the workplaces, in the homes, in the schools that you're a part of, that's where your voice is loudest. And that's often the scariest place to be loud and to tell people what you think. And so use that power and know that you're part of a large movement. You're not alone, and that we're continuing to grow. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for every word, Soumaya. Yes, this will not stop. Thank you for reminding us of our growing power, of our growing momentum, the fact that every single action matters, every conversation. We will not give up. And that this movement is only growing, and we are growing in numbers, growing in moral clarity, growing in power, growing in resistance, and we will hold every single person accountable. Just want to take this moment as a reminder to tell everyone that if you're fired up by what Paige and Soumaya are saying right now, in the description of this YouTube live stream, you're going to find links to an action toolkit where you can take action today and going forward. Lone, we'd love now to go to you with Rising Majority. Why is it so important for us to be throwing down right now? Are there actions you want to invite people into? And especially for those weathering the feeling of despair right now, what would you say?
Yeah, thank you, comrades. I am so emotional being with each of you in this moment, which is truly a moment of history, as in the United States alone, and we're often the weakest link in the international struggle for freedom and justice, that the overwhelming majority of the United States public is in favor of a ceasefire. And that is no small feat, and that is no small question that we are sitting with. And so when we pull the question of why is this so important for all of our movements, but also for all sectors of society to be throwing down, it is, of course, primarily because of 75 plus years of Israeli occupation of Palestine and the genocide that has been unfolding in this recent period. But it's also because of the centuries of a colonial project that the United States has imparted on indigenous people here on Turtle Island, because it is the centuries of enslavement, disenfranchisement that Black people, that African Americans have been struggling against in the United States, because it is decades and decades of forced migration of our Latin American comrades from the global South to the global North, because it has been the decades of incessant attacks on women, on queer people, on the families that we construct, on the people who we claim we belong to, whom we love, right? All of that is part of the context. And this is a really critical moment because every sector of society, whether you are a mother, a parent, a caregiver, a healthcare worker, a fast food worker, a domestic worker, a student, a professor, an artist, a writer, a journalist, you are being forced to confront the question of, do we continue to pour trillions and trillions of dollars into empire, into the US military, into these weapons corporations to line the pockets of these politicians? Or do we actually invest in the making of life? Do we invest in our hospitals? Do we invest in our schools? Do we invest in the human possibility to develop and change and to become our fullest potential and our fullest being, right? That is at the heart of the question. And our Palestinian comrades in their struggle and their decades-long struggle continue to demonstrate to us the ways that that struggle begs the question of, what does it mean to construct life as much as what it means to confront and go head on and face the violence of colonialism, of occupation, of apartheid. And we have so many lessons to draw on in this moment, right? We have so many, and I think in this period alone, we've probably, all of us are learning so much and making a lot of mistakes along the way. But at the heart of it, we are collectively experimenting what it means to actually build the kind of world that we want to see, right? And to engage both in the defensive strategies and tactics, because that's what's being asked of us in order to save lives, right? In order to keep our loved ones alive. But we're also being pulled to engage in offensive strategies, right? Which again, just to echo what folks have already named, which is why this court case is so historic for Palestinians to actually speak in their own names, right? In one of the most powerful, wealthiest countries in the world that consistently is on the wrong side of history. And now there are millions of people from inside of the belly of the beast who are saying, yeah, we know the United States is on the wrong side of history, and we're actually prepared to supplant that and to put something in its place. And so a lot of Rising Majority's work in this period has been, how do we weave together all of these important struggles, and how do we do it in a way that is actually rooted in genuine solidarity and not charity, that's rooted in real love for our people and not saviorism, that's really rooted not just in all of the things that we're against, but also the things that we are for, right? We are for healthcare, we are for housing, and we know where that money can come from. It can come from our military budget. And I think this is the moment to bust wide open that particular struggle, right? Because we know the ceasefire demand is incredibly necessary and it needs to happen now. And there are actors who can make that happen in the snap of a finger. And what does that open up, right? What are we prepared for next? Because history teaches us that empires do fall. So what are we building so that our people can be there on the other side and to be the ones who then make the decisions, right? To be the ones who actually construct the kind of democracy, the kind of economy, the kind of society that we actually want to live in. And so for me, you know, the question of despair is really real. And so I'm going to be both honest as well as hopeful that, comrades, it is very difficult to stop a war. And it is very difficult to stop a war in which the United States is fully committed to obliterating an entire people. And we have to face that truth head on. We have to have a real sober assessment of that. And that is what we've been contending with in this period, is the level of, there are some arenas where we don't have the power that we need. So I'm going to say that honestly, it is hard to stop a war. But the hopeful piece is that the political will, the political imagination, the political space that has been kept open, in particular for the struggle to free Palestine, has only continued to open. That there are literally billions of people on our side. And it will be the billions of people swelling up from around the world, from the global south, infusing their politics and revolutionary spirit into the revolutionary spirit that is here in the United States, that will stop this war and stop this occupation. And so some people might be familiar with the, saying pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. That is the space that we are digging into. And we call on our ancestors, we call on our revolutionary traditions, and we call on our visions for the future to deliver what we know our people, the Palestinian people, Black, Indigenous, queer people, women, disabled folks, migrants, people all around the world, to say this is actually the moment, right, to divest from war and destruction and genocide and occupation, and invest that in the makings of life. Invest it in people, invest it in the planet. And I think, you know, both Sumaya and Paige have said it really well. The gist of it is we got each other. And so if you are feeling the despair, channel it with other people, right? Let's look out for each other. Let's be in the streets, right? Let's go down to the courthouse in Oakland this morning, today. Come to the People's Tribunal. We'll be sharing information about that soon, because we know that sometimes you got to take the law into the streets, right? And all of that is a worthy experiment, and all of that is critical. And part of why Rising Majority is called Rising Majority is because it's in the numbers, but it's also embedded in history, and it's going to be reflected in the future. We have the majority that can make reality. So just really appreciate all of the work that folks are doing. And as much as we are in history, we're making it. And so let's take up that mantle and do it well.
We must invest in the makings of life. It is hard to stop a war, but we reassert we have the political will. We have the political imagination. Thank you so much for every word, Lone, and for your work at Rising Majority. I have a dear friend who says the choir needs preaching too. And I feel so much gratitude for the way you just shared those words with us. And now we're very excited and honored to go to Dimitri Holtzman with Earthseed Youth International. Dimitri, you are in South Africa, and we look so much to South Africa's example for its anti-apartheid struggle. And today, in particular, with the ruling of the International Court of Justice, we're just sending all the love to the people of South Africa who are leading in this moment by working to take Israel to task for genocide. As over here, we work, following the lead of the Center for Constitutional Rights, to take the US to task for its role in genocide in this US court case. What do you want to share today with all those listening?
Sure. Thank you very much, Elena, and to Tarek, also to my comrades Lone, Sumaya, and Paige. Just quick correction though, Elena, while I hail from South Africa, I'm actually here in Brooklyn, New York. But I'll still bring all of my South African spirit, energy, and vibe onto this call. So thank you for the questions. I know we're also running out of time, so I'll try to be as quick as I can. But I wanted to start actually just with your second question around what work that I'm involved in that I want to bring into this space and let people know about. Firstly, so I guess most importantly, I'm currently working with a collective of youth organizations from different parts of the world, including South Africa, Zimbabwe. There's groups in Nigeria, Brazil, and here in the United States, as well as a few other places that have been organizing young people to take action in their schools, in their communities, and also working in alliance with other Palestinian solidarity groups. They're also trying to work together towards coordinating these actions across the world. And so at this point, I just want to direct people to a statement and petition that's for Youth of the World for Palestine that you can find in the link that folks have been referring to. That's bit.ly/Youth of the World for Palestine, where you can both sign the petition and look out for further calls to action that will be coming from this collective. Turning then to your other two questions, starting with just the one around, why is it so important for all of us to, all of our movements across the world to be throwing down right now? I mean, I think there's like an obvious and pretty simple answer to that. Firstly, which is that Israel is carrying out this genocide, as folks have been saying, in full view of all of us. They're carrying out the genocide in front of the entire world, often live streaming that directly to our phones. So that's the obvious first reason why we should all be throwing down. But of course, there's additional reasons. Not only is Israel carrying this out, but they're also doing so with the active support in some instances or complicity in others of many global forces, of governments like the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and shockingly still many others, who, while they're supporting this genocide, are also simultaneously denying it, effectively gaslighting us, gaslighting the entire world. So this is why we need all of our movements. We need ordinary people, people of conscience, to continue actually taking a stand, to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine and to fight back against those very forces. The solidarity that Palestinians need to end the genocide, to end Israeli apartheid and occupation, is most definitely an all hands on deck kind of solidarity. It's also, speaking to you as a South African, we know that our own history, which included successfully defeating the apartheid regime, relied in large part on the sustained international solidarity that we saw. And so we as South Africans also know, and as the world has seen, that overcoming apartheid is not only possible, but that it also requires the world to stand up and demand that. So then, turning to your last question, or your other question about despair, and for those that are wondering, if their actions are actually working, I think my comrades that spoke just before me and others on this call have already said a lot to this. But I'll just add this. I'll say, firstly, also Palestinians on this call, we've heard from and have said directly to us, and those that are in Gaza, in the occupied West Bank, and in the diaspora, that they see our protests, that we should not look away, and that we should continue to stand up. And so that alone, for me, should be enough for us to remain steadfast in our solidarity and in our actions to end this genocide. But I'll also add that the horrors that we're witnessing, the slaughter that's happening in this genocide, while in many ways itself is unprecedented, so too is the sustained and ever-growing global support and solidarity that we've seen with Palestine. This level of protest for Palestine is undoubtedly inspiring and in and of itself unprecedented. And that includes millions of ordinary people from all walks of life, from all generations, from all corners of the world, that are joining us in this solidarity. And so as we see that, I'd reflect and I'd say that the pressure that we've built, as unprecedented as it is not obviously working as quickly as it would like, but we are seeing that it is having an impact. And if anything, it is continuing to isolate those who are standing on the wrong side of history. So I'll end by this and saying that, for me, we cannot wane in our solidarity for the people of Palestine. I don't think it's for us to indulge in the privilege of despair, which is what that is in this moment. And instead, I think it's for us to use whatever and every means possible to ensure that this genocide ends and that we see a free Palestine within our lifetime. Nelson Mandela said to us in South Africa that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. But I'd like to believe that he actually meant for that to apply to all of us. And so, that's our spirit of Ubuntu. That's what we refer to in South Africa, that my humanity is connected to that of others. And so I'll leave that for folks that are feeling any kind of despair. Just remember those words and remember your humanity. And I'll end by just saying that I want to send love and solidarity to our Palestinian friends that are testifying in court today, to those that are in Gaza, to those that are in the West Bank and in the diaspora. Ceasefire now and free Palestine. Thank you.
And we want to leave this segment with some words of encouragement from Angela Davis, whose birthday is today and who introduced Palestinian and Black solidarity to many of us. She said that you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much for those words, Paige. Thank you so much, Dimitri. Thank you so much, Lone. Thank you so much, Sumaya. All of that was just an infusion of inspiration. I appreciate you all so much. So, folks, we are about to close this pre-hearing live stream, and we're going to head over together to the hearing live in Oakland, California. Because right now, after 112 days of genocide, Palestinians will be having their day in court today, right now, in their lawsuit against President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Austin. In their own words, Palestinian plaintiffs are going to be telling the truth of the Biden administration's failure to prevent genocide, the crime of crimes, and its complicity, its active, full partnered complicity in Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, which, as Dimitri just so rightly said, has been streamed live to the world while Israel and the United States has actively gaslit Palestinians and the rest of the world watching, refuting that it's happening. This is the first time that we are aware of in US history when Palestinian people will be taking the stand in a US courtroom, not on defense, but on offense, to actively make a case for Palestinian rights and freedom.
So this is already a historic day. We've already won by having more than half a dozen Palestinians give live testimony, putting pressure on the US administration. Going forward, they'll have to think twice before cutting blank checks for genocide. The fact that CCR is bringing the case and the judge isn't just waving it out of hand makes it clear to the people who would otherwise be liable that they can't just engage in genocide without consequence. And to that end, we are picking up the baton that South Africa passed to us this morning. Thank you to everyone, especially our producers, Telegraph, our ASL interpreters, and all of the panelists. We want to remind everyone that there are toolkits below for how to take action. So please click on the links below. You can find us on social media today, and the links to the social media accounts are also in the links below. The link to the hearing itself is also below here in the YouTube page, so please click there now if you want to head over. The judge has taken the bench and things are off and running. While there's a limit on the number of people allowed into the Zoom there in court, the court is also recording it, so if you can't watch live, you'll still be able to watch it when the time comes.
Thank you so much, everyone. As Tariq just said, in the YouTube live stream, just look below in the event description, you'll see the link to go over to the hearing beginning now. The Israeli and US government want us to get too tired and weary and defeated to go on, right? That's what they want. We refuse. And not only do we refuse, not only do we not have the luxury of despair, as Dimitri so wisely said, but we are growing in power. We are growing in numbers. We are growing in solidarity. We are growing in clarity. We are growing in momentum. We commit to doing every single thing in our power to stop this genocide. And then to work until we see full Palestinian freedom, nothing less. We'll see you over on the hearing live stream. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, yeah.